Alright, welcome back, guys. Been a while since my last video. Quick apology, although it's not really an apology, but this is springtime. This is my busy season. I haven't put a video out in like 4 or 5 weeks, and that's because it's springtime. Things have been crazy here. I've been working my tail off. Apple trees are in flower right now, which is always a very exciting time of year. It's also a kind of a stressful time of year because we're hoping we don't get a late frost, so we're hoping we don't get too much rain, which we're getting right now. We're going to get rain all week, which I'm a little bit concerned about with the apple trees. I'm hoping the bees get out to do their thing. But anyways, I've really been wanting to put together another video, and I had 2 questions come through. One came through about 2 weeks ago, and when I saw that question, I said, gee, this might be a nice question to make a video about. And then another one came through just like 2 days ago. And it just kind of blends right in with that first question to open up an opportunity to have what I think is a really good conversation, and it's something I've been kind of wanting to touch on. This is going to be in regards to dealing with plant fungus and pesticides and pesticide applications, specifically fungicides, to kind of walk you through some of the decisions that I make or some of the thought processes that I go through when I'm deciding, do I need to spray again? Should I spray more? Could I spray less? Etc., etc. Always the goal is to spray as little as you have to. Nobody likes working with pesticides. I don't like working with pesticides. So you're always trying to tweak and play with things and finagle things so that you're spraying less often and less pesticides, but you're trying to get them applied more effectively and more efficiently so that you can still get a good crop. That's always the goal. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. And these 2 questions really did a nice job of leading me into this conversation. So let's just get right to this. Okay, so the first question comes from Peter, and it came in about 10 or 12 days ago. And it says, we tried Daconil on our stone fruits this year per your recommendation for brown rot, which is great. That's what I recommend. We have also started using Captain on our apples for scab control. However, we have over 200 apple trees and only about a dozen peach and plum combined. The Captain can be used for both apples and stone fruits. We only have a 20-gallon sprayer, and our stone fruits are scattered throughout the orchard. So I wish I had put my video out on how to start an orchard before for you, because that's one of the things I talked about in that video is, if you're going to have stone fruits, keep your stone fruits here and your palm fruits here. It makes for spraying a lot easier. You got a fruit cocktail, a fruit cocktail orchard. But that's okay. You can work through that. Believe me, I deal with this all the time. Could I get away with just using Captan for both issues, or should I do the separate sprays, like do the Daconil on the stone fruits and the Captan on the palm fruits? Could you just run Captan through the whole thing and it would make your spraying life much easier? And the answer to that is maybe. And that's why I wanted to make a video about this rather than just answer your question yes or no, because there's a little bit more to it that I'm going to kind of walk you through, okay? And that leads me to the second question, which just came in 2 days ago. And this question comes from Southern Yankee Prepper. The Southern Yankee Prepper. Hold on a minute. There you go, my Yankee friend. I put this one on just for you. I've been a Red Sox fan ever since I knew what a baseball was. But anyways, if successful in preventing scab completely for a season or 2 in a row, is spraying necessary the following seasons, or should the scab be completely gone, assuming the prior seasons everything was cleaned up and sprayed correctly, or will scab always be a problem in my orchard? That's a really good question, and it is a very viable thought that you could get away with that. What he's saying is, if I get the scab completely clean in my orchard, and I do everything and there's no scab in my orchard for 2 years, is it feasible to think that I could go maybe a year or two without spraying and still have a scab-free crop? And my answer to that would be that it is possible, maybe not probable. And I have some suggestions for you that could certainly kind of like a happy medium between the thought of not spraying or a full spray program, because I know, spraying apples is a headache. You're spraying these things, 6, 7, 8 times a year or whatever, and it's a nightmare. But I'm going to walk you through that. We might be able to help you out with that a little bit. I'll give you at least my opinion on it, okay? Because the answer on that really is maybe. And I'll give you an example of why it could be a viable thought. I have it many times throughout my 40 years of doing this. I have had customers that have said, "Oh, we planted some apple trees, a couple of years ago, and the first 2 years, maybe 3 years, they did great. The apple trees were healthy. We got a few apples off of them, and it was wonderful, and we were happy. And now, for the past 2 years, we've been getting nice apples off of them because they've been in the ground for 4 years now. But boy, the apples look horrible. They're covered with scab. We have all kinds of problems." And the reason for that is that, if they didn't have any apples or crab apples on their property when they planted those apple trees, chances are there was no scab pathogen on those apple trees, on that property. And after 2 or 3 years, basically the pathogen found your trees. And now it's there because now it has a host. And so now it's going to stay there. So the concept that you could clean up your orchard well enough that you could go for a year or two maybe without spraying is a valid concept. But I don't know if it's really plausible. And I'm going to talk about that too. But both those questions together have led me to what I really want to kind of hit home with this video. And that is variables within your situation when it comes to spraying your fruit trees.
Hey, Southern Yankee, this is for you.
All right, so here's my advice to you as to your question goes. If you get scab under control, is it feasible that you could stop spraying for a couple of years? I personally would not recommend that. Okay, because, and this is just me, and here's why. For me, there's nothing worse than going through the whole part of your growing season, and then you get to the end of June, beginning of July, whatever, middle of July, depends on where you live. And all of a sudden you start seeing these black spots all over your apples. And you very quickly realize that oh man, I got scab. And I just lost my crop. That kind of just sucks the winds out of your sails, because now you got to wait till next year in the hopes of growing a good crop again. And for me, I've been down that road more times than I care to even recall. And that's just the worst. What I would say is that if you've gone a couple of years without any scab and your fruit and your trees have looked really good, and keep your cultural controls in place, what you might want to consider doing, and this is what I would do if it were me. In fact, I do this. Here, I'll give you a real world example. The big orchard that I take care of, it's the food bank orchard. If you've been watching my channel, that's a big orchard. That's an old commercial orchard. It's big, it's old trees, and we're on a budget there because we just donate all that fruit away. And it's one of my customers owns it. And we don't do any leaf cleanup there at all. It's just too time consuming. It's too much time and too much work. There's no way we can do it. So we are always under heavy disease pressure there, so I have to keep a very aggressive spray program there. And I'm starting pretty early, usually at half-inch green. As soon as I got little bits of green foliage, I'm going to start my spray program because I know we have a ton of disease pressure. Literally 2 houses down from him, which is, these are big properties, so 2 houses down is a fair chunk down the road. I have another client, they're actually friends. He has a beautiful setup in his yard. They're actually in his front yard. He's got about 18, maybe 20 trees up on a hill. It kind of drains down on both sides, full sunlight. This is a beautiful estate, meticulously maintained. The landscapers do a very thorough fall cleanup. They do another spring cleanup early in the spring. the trees are pruned properly, everything's perfect. On that account, I won't even think about starting my spray program until tight cluster, maybe even early pink, because all the other facets are in place, okay, and it just works. The big orchard where we don't have the cleanup in place, I'm going to start that spray program as soon as I got little bits of green foliage. So I might have 2 applications on the big orchard without the cultural controls before I'm even doing my first application at the other orchard where we have all the cultural controls in play. So what you might want to try doing is something of that nature, rather than saying, gee, maybe I don't have to spray it all this year. Maybe try to kind of dial in your spray program so that you're like, if you're typically doing, let's say, 5 or 6 sprays a year to really get that scab under control, you might be able to dial that into 3 sprays. You know, run your mancozeb out there and do them at, you know, tight cluster, pink, and petal fall, and then kind of see what happens. See if that works for you. 3 sprays a year, you know, that's not bad. If you can pull that off and get away with that consistently, that might be a nice way to kind of dial it in a little bit. So you're spraying a lot less, but you still have something out there during the period of time when your disease pressures are the highest, you know, and then see how that goes. And at the end of the year, if you go, oh, well, gee, that worked out really well, then maybe you can try that again in next year. But you also want to keep in mind the other variables. That's kind of what this video is all about, are the variables that are involved. If you have a really wet year, you might want to put an extra spray out there, because if you have a really wet season, that's going to increase your disease pressures, okay? So you might want to kind of keep that in the back of your mind while you're, you know, these are the things I think about all the time during apple season. I'm watching the weather like a hawk. I'm getting to know my different properties, the ones where I'm going to be under heavy disease pressure and I know I need to spray, and the ones where this is a beautiful setup and it's culturally controlled, maintained, and clean and everything. I can dial back my applications a little bit on this property. Okay, I would kind of do it that way. I think I would try first off by cutting back on the number of applications that I do. Focus on tight cluster, pink, and petal fall, because that's when your pressures are going to be the highest. See how that works out from you, and then make those decisions down the road. I would rather see you do that than see you just go cold turkey, no spray, and lose your crop, and then you have to wait a whole another year to start over again. I hope that makes sense. Okay, and the second question, which was from Peter, and he's talking about, you know, can I just use Captan on everything and see if that works? And the answer is similar. You know, maybe you can. There's variables involved that are going to answer that question for you, and the variables that I can't answer yes or no. Okay, the reason, like, if you watch my scab video, I recommend mancozeb. I use Manzate. Manzate is like the commercial version of mancozeb, and I'm mentioning that to you because you say you had 200 trees, so you're getting to that point where you might want to start delving into the world of the more commercial grade products. You probably could save money, and that might be a whole video that I might make at some point in time, because I made these videos initially really geared towards the home gardener who might have 4 or 5 or 6 trees, who's going to buy their stuff at Ace Hardware or, you know, Home Depot or whatever. But I do have some people, based on the comments that I'm seeing, that have larger orchards, you know, 150 trees, 200 trees, whatever. I might make a video where we're going to start talking about some of the more commercial products that it might be worth it for you to buy if you're at that scale. Now, the reason I recommend mancozeb for scab is simply because it is better than Captan for scab. Okay, Captan can control scab. Mancozeb is better at it, and that's why I recommend mancozeb for those first couple of sprays early in the spring when those scab pressures are at their highest. Okay, the you know, half-inch green, tight cluster, pink, petal fall. That's when your scab is going to be really prevalent in your environment. And Mancozeb is just a better product for controlling it. Mancozeb also has like a 77-day pre-harvest interval. So you can really only use Mancozeb earlier in the year. And I'm going to kind of use that to lead into my disclaimer. Always read your labels. Make sure you read your labels. Labels can change over time. Labels can be different in different states. Don't listen to what I'm telling you. Use my information as a guide, but always read and follow your labels. You got to do that. So that's why I like Mancozeb for those early season sprays on the pome fruits, on the apples. Okay, because it is just a better product for scab. And then once you get past petal fall, you're getting into what we call our cover sprays. At that point, I recommend that you switch over to Captan. And there's a couple reasons for that. First of all, Captan has only a 30 or 33 day pre-harvest interval. So you can spray a couple shots of Captan out there, still be within your pre-harvest interval. Also, once you get later into the season like that, your scab pressures are declining. Okay, you're not going to be under such a strong demand for controlling scab, but at that same point in time, your fly speck and your sooty blotch disease pressures are increasing. And it just so happens that Captan is much better at controlling sooty blotch and fly speck than Mancozeb is. So it really kind of works out perfectly. You can get a couple sprays of Captan in after petal fall, and it will give you some control of scab if there's still some scab lingering around. But it will give you much better control of sooty blotch and fly speck when they are at their highest pressures for infecting your trees. So that's kind of why I recommend that. And then regarding the pome fruits on your property, I recommend Daconil early in the season. It's a very similar situation to the Mancozeb and Captan on the apple trees. I recommend the Daconil earlier in the season because by label restrictions, you can only spray Daconil up until shuck split. So you only have that small window in the beginning of the season until, like just after petal fall when you can use Daconil. It also happens that is by far when you are going to be under your highest disease pressure for brown rot. Is right before, during, and after their flowering is when brown rot is really trying to get into your trees. And Daconil is a much better product for controlling brown rot than Captan is. Captan can control it, but it's not as good as Daconil. So that's why I recommend Daconil during those early season sprays when it is labeled for use, and it is very effective against brown rot compared to Captan. And then once you get past shuck split, now your brown rot pressures have declined, okay? But you can still get some scab and some other things at that point. Captan can step in, it can kind of take over at that point. You're still within your days to harvest interval. You're still getting good protection. Captan is a very good product. I just don't think it's as good. It's not as good as Daconil. So again, the concept of this whole video was understanding your variables, okay? Will Captan be enough to control the scab on your apple trees as opposed to the Mancozeb? It might be. And the variables of that are going to be if you have your cultural controls in place, you keep a clean orchard, okay? If you're pruning them so that they get good air circulation, the varieties of apple trees that you have. Some variety, if you have 200 trees, I know you ain't got 200 Macintosh out there, right? Obviously, you're running a lot of different varieties out there. Some varieties are going to be more or less prone to scab. That's just the way it is. Is the Captan going to be enough to keep the scab off of the varieties that are very prone to scab? It may or may not be. It depends on your situation. It could depend on the weather, the rain. If you have a very wet season, you might want that stronger control of the Mancozeb over the Captan to help control your scab. And I'll give you another example. These are all just real life things. I literally just dealt with what I was just saying to Peter. I was just out on Friday dealing with that and what I'm going to explain to you right now. That big orchard, the food bank orchard that I take care of. There's a ton of varieties out there. Some of these trees are 80, 90 years old. There's a lot of old school varieties out there. We got, Baldwins and Winesaps and Macintosh. And within that orchard, he has 2 short rows, maybe 10 trees in each row, of younger trees. They were probably planted just a few years before I started working there. And they're a type of Gala. I saw a tag on one of them once. I want to say it was like Gala Royale or Gala Supreme or something like that. It was some form of Gala apple. And I always have problems with scab on those apples. And I know they're the same ones. I know they were planted at the same time. They're the same size. They all have the same attributes. And even though there are 2 rows in 2 different areas of the nursery, I always have a problem with scab on those Gala apples. And they're not that big. They're just moderate sized trees. And so, after a couple of years of being in this orchard, like, I've just come to realize that these specific trees I always have a problem with. So this year I just did it on Friday because we're going to get rain this whole week. We're supposed to have rain. Friday I went out there and I just used my little sprayer in my pickup truck and I mixed up 60 gallons or something, and I went out and I just plastered all those galas. I've just come to learn through the years that those Gala apples are gonna need an extra spray, because just doing my standard spray program throughout that big orchard, it just has not been enough for that one variety of apple. You might find something like that at your place. If you've got 200 trees, you might find, okay, I'm just going to do the Captan thing. I'm going to run Captan and hope for the best. And you might find that you have a row of Galas, and the rest of your trees you were okay with just running that Captan to simplify your spray program, except for that one row of Galas, right? So then next year you might want to take a note, keep a journal. I keep notes all the time. I got all kinds of record keeping and journals and things that I do. So next year you might say, okay, you know what, maybe we want to do something a little extra on those Galas. Either give them an extra spray or spray them with some Mancozeb or Manzate. In a situation like yours, you got 200 trees, mostly pome fruits, a handful of stone fruits. You can try it. You can try and just run the Captan, and it might work for you. Okay, and much like what I was just telling Peter, another variable that you have no control over is the weather. You might find that running Captan might work fine for you one year if you have a dry year, and then the following year, if you have a very wet spring and a very wet early summer, you might find that the Captan didn't work for you. These are all variables that you have to kind of keep in mind, and that comes with practice, gut feeling, instinct, and just getting to know your orchard. Okay, and another little trick, and maybe you do this already, I don't know, but one of the things that I do, again, on a larger orchard, you got 200 trees, sometimes it can be a little tough to keep track of or remember every single tree on a property and whatever. Flagging tape. I keep a roll of this in my truck. Matter of fact, I just ran out to my truck to grab this. This can come in really handy. You keep this in a Sharpie, and you can take a piece of this stuff and you can tie it around a tree and write a little note on the flag with a Sharpie, or you could even just write a number on there, number 5, and then in your notes write down orange flag number 5 had a problem with scab in 2025. Whatever, you can keep notes. You can tag individual trees. And I've been doing this trick ever since I worked in a commercial nursery years ago. That place was huge, and they had thousands and thousands of plants. And I would use flagging tape if I saw or had a concern with one tree that I knew I would never be able to go back and find that one plant again, and then try to find one lilac in a block of 600. But if you put an orange flag on it, you can go right back and find it. These are the kinds of things that can help anyone in any orchard situation, because every orchard is going to have variables. Okay, your environmental condition. Keep in mind, the pathogen, the fungus triangle. Okay, I have a whole video out on this. I think I have 2 videos out on this. They're my older videos. Remember that if you're not familiar with it, the disease triangle. In order to have disease on your tree, you got to have 3 things. You have to have the disease, you have to have the pathogen, you have to have the right environmental conditions, you have to have the host. Okay? Some years the environmental conditions could be horrible for the disease, or they could be not bad, depending on how much rain you get, what kind of temperatures you have, etc. Okay? If you have, some of your trees might be disease resistant. So if some of your trees are disease resistant, you are in essence, you are removing the host, right? Because you don't, if let's say you've got a couple of Freedom apples out there, and those are really scab resistant, they're quite well. So in that respect, you're kind of removing the host, because those trees are not a host to scab, at least not very well. And then the pathogen, if you keep your cultural controls in place and keep everything cleaned up, you're going to have less pathogen, you're going to have less disease pressures. So these are all variables that come into play, and you can dial in or dial out your spraying depending on the variables that you're dealing with in your orchard. Okay, and the best thing that you can do if you want to do that is to keep a journal. Keep your eyes out there. Keep an eye on things. Tag trees if something goes wrong and write it down in your journal. And that can really help you to kind of dial in or out your spray program as you need to. Now, another thing that you can do, and this is going to kind of go back, I really should make a video about this. I don't know what you're using for a product. Like you said, you're using Captan, and you mentioned Daconil on your pome fruits. I am guessing with 200 trees, you are getting into that point where you can potentially start looking at commercial products. I get your pain with the Daconil and Captan and Manzate and pome fruits, and you can't use that on stone fruits, and it's a pain in the neck. And I deal with it all the time. I mean, I don't have like one orchard. I got like 15 customers that have home orchards. And some of them have peaches, and some of them have pears, and some of them have apples, and some of them have cherries. And I got to keep all this straight, and I got to write all this stuff down, because when I'm out spraying, it can be a nightmare. So I get it. Like, I understand what you're going through 100%. One of the things that you could consider, if you wanted to just simplify your spray program and say, I just want to make one mix and spray all my fruit trees with it. Okay, Captan is a good option for that, because it is labeled for both. Okay, there are add-on products. Like I have, I would say 3 what I would call foundational fungicides, and they are Daconil, Mancozeb or Manzate, and Captan. Okay, and then there are add-on fungicides, things that you can mix in with them that can give them a really nice little boost. And one of those is the Immunox. I talk about it in my scab video. I think I talked about it in my brown rot video. It's Spectricide Immunox. The active ingredient in that is myclobutanil. The commercial grade product goes by the name Eagle, which you might want to look into because you're up to scale. And then there's another one called Rally, but that's you have to mix at least 100 gallons at a clip to use Rally. All the same product. You can mix myclobutanil with Captan, and you can use that to spray all your fruit trees. So now you've simplified your spray program. But if Captan is a little bit lacking for the scab, or it's a little bit lacking for the brown rot, by adding in that myclobutanil, you're kind of boosting your fungicide's ability to maybe make it a little bit stronger. And it's one spray that you can use on everything. And there are other products out there like that, but you're getting more into the commercial world. One of which I believe thiophanate methyl is labeled for apple trees. Yes, it is. There are products like thiophanate methyl, which goes by the name Cleary's 333.6, or it's called Topsin. And I think in the homeowner world, I think Southern Ag makes a thiophanate methyl product, which is kind of similar to myclobutanil. It's labeled for both apples and peaches. I would not use it as a standalone, but if you were to add it to Captan, it can make that Captan a little more effective. Now, so you would have a little more cost involved because you'd be mixing 2 products together, but less time and labor because you can mix those 2 products, go out, do 1 spray, still get pretty good control between the Captan and the add-on. It does get very complicated, and I feel your pain, I really do. And these are just a couple of suggestions, and what I would say is, much like I said to Peter, you can try the Captan, but keep track of what's going on. Keep an eye on things. Make sure you have all your cultural controls in place, because Captan is not your best option for scab. It's not your best option for brown rot. So just really keep an eye on things. Keep your cultural controls in place. Keep good journals and records. See what's going on. You can dial things in and out. And maybe I will put together a video where I'll start talking about some of these more commercial products that are they're more expensive to buy, but you can make hundreds of gallons. Like one jug might cost you $250, but you can make 1,000 gallons with it. But you want to be mixing it, and it's really meant for orchards of a larger scale. You're not going to want to buy this stuff if you got 6 trees. But anyways, I'm rambling here. I hope this answered your question, and really the point that I wanted to get across is really try to understand the funguses that you're dealing with, how they work, the variables that are involved, because you can tweak your sprays quite specifically if you just keep an eye on things and understand what's at play, understand how these funguses come in, when they're going to come in, what they're going to affect, which trees are going to be more susceptible, have I got my cultural controls in place, etc., etc. Really keep an eye on the variables, because they can make a huge difference as to whether your spray program is going to be effective or not. Hope that was helpful. I hope I helped you guys out. If you're new to the channel, if you want to watch some more of my videos, like and subscribe, all that good stuff. Thank you so much, guys. Have a good night.